Well, on what day did Jason Kenney go to Coutts for the blockades that were taking place, or Milk River? He never showed up, right?
Yeah.
There were, alleged conversations and negotiations between MLAs and, local politicians and the demonstrators, but never Jason Kenney himself. And I think that was a large reason for his stepping down and then his resignation from politics thereafter, is because he was taking such a hard line with the very voters who put him there. He was refusing to listen to them. Instead, he was enforcing a lockstep mentality, which I think just didn't work for many people. I mean, these were, there were thousands of people at these demonstrations who had lost everything, and Jason Kenney wouldn't even show his face to them. So, you need a strong leader. At the end of the day, you need a strong leader, and that's somebody who takes into consideration everybody who they're working for.
Well, and it was like Jason Kenney himself, to me, I'm the one who asked him the question. I think that clip factored into the fact that he's no longer the premier. He said to me, like, oh, well, no, we passed laws. There's no such thing as a vaccine passport. He's like, this is nuts. You couldn't possibly conceive of us doing this. And then like weeks later, he's like, oh, we have this alternatively named vaccine passport that isn't a vaccine passport. It looks like one. It walks like one. It quacks like one, but it isn't a vaccine passport. And that was weeks later. And then after that, I had the opportunity to question him. And he went on a bit of a tirade about, we don't need horse deworm. Like it was, I'm like, it's almost a little bit of what we see with Justin Trudeau, where a year later he's like, oh no, people have been injured and stuff. And I'm quoting Justin Trudeau here, YouTube. So, but they're like, no, that's not what I said. That's not what happened. They've completely flipped the script on something from months ago. And then they're acting as though it never happened. Yeah, there's the clip right there at the Calgary Stampede. So the sentiment of, oh no, this absolutely could never happen. There's not going to be these vaccine passports. And then the script is flipped. And MLAs who were concerned about that are like, no, you just told us that we were never going to do this and that this was illegal in this province. They were rightfully speaking out against that. And I think if nothing else from this question, from this answer from Danielle Smith, it did sound like, and commitments from premiers are what they're worth. We saw Jason Kenney go back on one, but she did seem to suggest that MLAs would be free to vote and advocate for their constituents. I think that is really solid and probably something that people, particularly in the rural areas, like to hear. This election, we talk so much about how it's going to be decided in Calgary. Calgary voters, obviously, and Edmonton voters, you look at the progressive mayors, not perhaps as freedom-oriented, not perhaps as oriented towards conservatism. So there is a concern that in the effort to pursue votes in Calgary or Edmonton, rural issues, concerns, and priorities might be disregarded. So if those MLAs in those rural areas are guaranteed by Danielle Smith this capacity to express their opinions freely, I think that is promising moving forward and may prevent another leadership review in the near future.
Well, to express their constituents' opinions freely.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And, on that note, I think we have another video coming up about Coutts and that situation as we just described, and Danielle Smith and some of the conversations she was supposedly having during that time. I'm not sure if we can pull to that clip now.
Coutts and Trudeau.
I would love Rob to talk a bit about this because he's the lawyer and I'm not. But this whole phrase of peace, order, and good government, I think it's become a shorthand to the federal government can do whatever the heck it wants, and we just have to be peaceful and orderly about it. And that's not, in my view, what it should mean. The federal government has said they want every federally regulated industry to have vaccine mandates. So that's broadcast media, radio and television broadcast media. It's all of the telecom companies. It's all of the grain elevators. It's the ports. It's the banks. And so are we going to get to a point where to be able to get a bank account, you're going to have to be vaccinated because you won't be able to walk in the door? I have no idea. But the fact that this is the line in the sand that's been drawn because the federal government has so much more planned. They have so much more coming. And I think this is the reason why we want to see this win. We want to see it win so that they don't end up rolling out the full plan. And we want to see it win at Coutts so that Jason Kenney, Scott Moe together become the first premiers to turn it around at the provincial level so that other premiers will follow.
So the first thing I want to do here is tackle, this is obviously one of the countless clips of Danielle Smith often on shows or from her past radio career discussing a subject, but I think there's been a lot of sort of misinterpretation of what is being said here. she quite clearly says that she wants a win for Jason Kenney and Scott Moe. She's not. She's the sentiment is that she's saying she wants like a categorical win for the Coutts truckers there, which I wouldn't have a problem with her saying that. But I think what she's saying here is she wants the politicians, despite the the federal government overstepping, she wants these politicians to go listen to these people's concerns, not just trample them, not implement these vaccine mandates, and she wants some good to come of this. She wants the provincial governments, which at the time Jason Kenney, Scott Moe, to have that win, to prove that they listen to the people, and to prove that they can push back against this overreach from the federal government. I also find it interesting that that video clip should in no way, shape, or form be contentious. Press progress very often seems to be seeking scandal where none should exist. The sentiment being echoed here that no one should be forced to be vaccinated. Justin Trudeau said that within the last week. Oh, we never forced anybody. We would never do that whatsoever. Jason Kenney said that would absolutely never happen. And to almost everyone in this country, the notion of forced vaccinations or coerced vaccinations was entirely appalling and has been throughout this entire time until all of a sudden progressives switched and said, oh no, Big Pharma is good and we absolutely have to be on board with this. The sentiments she's relaying here are absolutely mainstream and absolutely sentiments that any politician should be able to carry freely in a free and sensible society, particularly one like Canada that has so long advocated for individuals' freedoms.
Well, and on that note, we do have some breaking news about the Coutts blockade that comes to us from the Democracy Fund. And, a lot of people have heard, there was the charges, there was, alleged violence at the Coutts blockade and whatnot. But today we have a story showcasing that multiple fines have now been dropped for numerous truckers who are at the Coutts blockade. So this is coming to us, just recently. And I think this is a really great step. There was talk of amnesty from Danielle Smith, but regardless of that, it seems like this and the Democracy Fund and their fight for these guys is paying off. So I don't know, Adam, what do you think about this breaking story?
Yeah, it's good. You look right across the board. I know, and I'm the one that Danielle Smith initially made that promise to twice, in fact, that she would look into and pursue amnesty for everyone involved with these vaccine mandates with COVID-19 restrictions. Now, in her defense, she did pursue them, and she was basically informed it was not a possibility. So as far as her commitment to pursue these, I do feel she's honored that. Now, do I feel like she's gone all the way, and the extent that she promised she'd combat these things and that these were evils during the leadership campaign, has she quite lived up to that? No, absolutely not. And I think we could all agree to that. But sometimes it takes an appeal process. Sometimes it takes years of legal happenings. And unfortunately, sometimes people spend a lot of time behind bars as a consequence of these. But on many of these cases, perhaps the most recent one, and again, there'll be an appeal process with Pastor Artur Pawlowski and the Critical Infrastructure Defense Act. Most of these charges, whether it be for Pastor James Coutts, Pastor Tim Stevens, many of the people who were down at the border, the courts are not entirely, but largely getting these rights, often on the appeal process. But lots of these charges that have been laid, lots of the fines are going away. So there are wins taking place. And for those who are completely discouraged and did see some of the extremely questionable decisions coming out of courts, when it gets to the higher levels, it does seem, I mean, maybe I'm being optimistic, but it does seem like the courts of law are starting to get some of these things right. I think originally with the big push, whether it be from the federal government, whether it be from media, people in courts, they are human beings, and they can be subject to those pressures and whims and the spirit of the age from society. So I think for a time there was sort of a sentiment within the courts that, oh, these people are extremists. Once they paused, took a breath, and started to look at the charter violations and extreme serious concerns that were taking place, they started to realize that this was problematic. Again, should any of these people have spent extensive time behind bars? Absolutely not. But it is good to see that the courts are starting to get some of this right. Again, for those people who've lost years of their life, being involved in litigation is stressful. There's costs involved. Often we're able to help, whether it be through Fight the Fines or Save Artur or many of these other efforts through the Democracy Fund that we've been able to help these individuals. But it is nonetheless a stressful experience. It should never have happened. But it is good to see these good news stories coming out and some wins for these people who are simply standing up for their freedoms.
And oftentimes the punishment is the process. And
Yeah.
we're seeing that a lot over the last 2 years, right? It may be that somebody comes home at the end of the day, proven innocent, but you've still gone through the punishment of having to go through the court cases, having to pay through the lawyers. It's a very unfortunate thing to have to deal with for anybody. And then, we talk about those who've actually spent time behind bars. I mean, there's still people who are serving time in pre-bail custody who have not been found guilty of crimes, yet they remain locked up. It's a very unfortunate thing to say in the state of Canada.
And later on, I just wanted to say later on, I do want to talk at length about some charges and some other things that have sort of evolved, and the sort of glaring double standards and the degree of penalties that are being placed against people based on the nature of their crimes. But I'm getting ahead of us here, certainly.
That's a clip from something we call Rebel News Daily. It's our daily live stream hosted by my friend David Menzies, but the show also includes a rotating cast of hosts and special guests, including me. It's a great way for us to talk about the news of the day as the news is happening in an unscripted fashion, and it's an awesome way for you to interact with us as well. We stream every weekday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Mountain, wherever you find Rebel News. See you there.